TV. Well, lots of people don't know about the Apple TV itself because, as Apple quotes, it's just a hobby. So before going into the iOS and its architecture, I'm going to tell you some interesting facts about iOS that not a lot of people know around. So let's start with that. The first thing is, where does iOS come from? And you'd be interested to know that it comes from a company called Next. If I'm not wrong, you all would probably know Steve Jobs, the creator of startup company Apple. And when he left Apple in 1988, he started another company called Next. This company, it actually made workstations, but this company achieved something very great in terms of software. They invented or created an operating system that was called Next Step, and that Next Step was implemented on Next computer systems. Next computer systems were essentially, like you can see, Unix-based. They ran all what normal Unix systems do, and the interesting fact about it is that the World Wide Web, as we know it, the internet, was actually created on a Next Step system. And it was actually the first web server on the internet, the Next computer system. So why this computer system is important is because it was one of the very first computers to actually implement the object-oriented multitasking environment on a very large scale. And though not many people bought it, it actually became the very inherent structure of all the operating systems onwards. And as we know that runs the Next Step operating system with its object libraries and very core. It was then a little bit moderated and edited and was developed into OpenStep. That OpenStep went on into Sun Microsystems, which is now owned by Oracle company. We all know about the famous database company and data server industries like Oracle, and it actually went on in Windows NT to the Windows 95 as we know it. And that Next Step is actually the very core of your Mac OS X and iOS operating system. That these iOS and OS X are the direct descendants of the OpenStep lineup. That Next Step came through a very huge evolutionary process of years of work, and in 2007 it became iOS. We're going to discuss something a little bit about iOS architecture now. See, when Apple launched iPhone, it was really great in its sense that it ran applications that normally all of us didn't want, like Maps, Google Maps, and social networks and web-based applications. But it all was the essence of something that it was in the very essence of it. It was a layered architecture. It was very organized and it was very well managed. The whole ecosystem of it was greatly managed by it, and we're going to discuss about it. Yes, the X here shows OS X. It's famous for the OS X operating system. Just like what I said, OpenStep was the very predecessor of iOS and OS X. So iOS is essentially your OS X running on a mobile operating system, but it is optimized for a mobile operating system. Okay, these are the this is the layered architecture of iOS. At the top is the application layer. Well, application layer is not the developmental layer. It's the layer we all see as the consumers. We run applications. So that is the application layer. Beneath it are the four fundamental layers of iOS architecture. That is the Cocoa Touch, media layer, core services, and core OS. We're going to talk about it, and I'll try to make it very simple for you people. So I'm only going to discuss the most important layers. The very two layers that power almost every application, well actually every application on iOS. That is the Cocoa Touch and core services, which are commonly called the core framework that power all the iOS applications. So Cocoa Touch. Okay, we all have seen how iOS applications work and their great user interface. Well, that is the very product of this Cocoa Touch layer. Cocoa Touch layer is the topmost layer on the developmental layers. And before going into it, I'm going to tell you that the reason I'm telling you about these layers is that when you're going to go and develop applications, you have to know about these layers. Because when you're going to create your application, you know which layer you're dealing with, so that you don't get confused with all the APIs and everything. So if you're going to create something like a simple visual application, you don't have to go anywhere. You just have to do it in the Cocoa Touch layer, and you can find it in the developmental guides and documentation too. If you want to go into the deep and services, you go into the core services layer and get services from there. I'm going to tell you about that, how you can do that. So, what is Cocoa Touch? In its very essence, Cocoa Touch is the very buttons, icons, and animations you see on the iPhone screen or iOS's screen. The very animations that the very eye can be displayed that you see on an iPhone. Cocoa Touch layer has something called UI kit. The UI, if you all know, UI is short for user interface. So UI kit contains all the general elements that are used in any application, like the keyboard, or the buttons, or the sliders, like this. This is the button setting. The date picker. These are general elements. When you go into the software, and just like Abdurreza will show you after some time, when you go into the Xcode developmental tool, you find these buttons already made there. All you have to do is pick them, drag them, and put them on the iPhone screen, the virtual iPhone screen that you'll see on the Mac OS X desktop. I'll tell you about that later. So that's Cocoa Touch. Cocoa Touch that powers all the graphical and event-based apps, and built on the very Mac OS X frameworks, but it is optimized for mobile, obviously. An interesting fact is that we all say that developing in OS X would be difficult. It's not difficult because we all learn C and C++. So this Cocoa Touch is implemented in Objective-C mostly, but it's also implemented in C and C++. So if you have even a little bit of knowledge of C and C++, you can just start up, and Objective-C is not very different from them. It's just one of the people. I read an article and he said, "What is Objective-C? It's the mother of C, only that it has object orientation in it. It just has objects, which we all, I think even electrical students learn object-oriented programming. So it's just objects in C. That's the difference." And yeah, Cocoa Touch follows a model view controller. I'll tell you that is the software architecture. That is a technique that is used. And it's a very basic technique and it's very simple. Powerful, yeah. Cocoa Touch has powerful animation, powerful frameworks like core animation, core data, and core audio. Okay, now I'm going to discuss something about model view controller. अच्छा, normally हम जब coding करते हैं, say like C++ में, we start writing the code and then we run it and a DOS, a terminal comes in. Say that is simple coding you do. But when you're making an application for a big market, like the app market, so you have to follow a certain structure so that your applications run smoothly, so that not every second person starts saying the application crashes. So in iOS, the software follows a certain architecture. It's a model view controller. There are three basic fundamental parts of this architecture. I'm going to discuss that now. One is model, one is view, and one is controller. Now they're basically very simple. They're just some technical names for what we see every day. View is the very iPhone screen we see. That is our view. Model is the code that we write for that view. I'm going to make it a bit simple for you. I mean, model view controller has many implementations. you can implement it in whatever way you like. Like there are certain alterations to it, but in very essence, view is the very display you see, model is the code you write, and the controller is something that communicates between view and model. So, for example, let me give you an example. I press a button on my iPhone screen, right? That button is actually an event that happened. I touch the button, the controller gets that event. That's the user pressed the button. It forwards that command to the model. Obviously, the code is going to change. There must be something in the code that when the button is pressed, do this. The model is now going to have some changes in it. And then that changes are going to be forwarded to the view. And eventually, your iPhone's view screen will change. That is the very basic thing that happens in iPhone's software. It's that simple. Now I'm going to talk about core services. Okay, all your applications are not just visual. Obviously, we employ some certain services like Bluetooth service, the 3G service, 2G service, and Wi-Fi, and all these services. The core services provides you the fundamental services to be used in your application. So, for example, if you're going to make an application that connects to internet and opens a certain page or opens a certain link, downloads certain stuff for you, you're going to use core services for that. Core touch is the very display you see, and core services is the back end of it. So what is in core services? The core services has foundation frameworks. If you work in iPhone application, you'll find out that next step, there are some remnants of next step there. Like you'll find that the data types, like we have in C++, the integer and the integer pointer and all these, you'll find out that in Objective-C they are named as NS pointer. The NS word is used commonly because that all comes back from the next step thing. So in core services you will find out foundation frameworks. Foundation frameworks are the basic frameworks that are in any application. And just like I'm going to tell you, if you're going to use a messaging application that sends messages from one application to another, you're going to use a ready-made service. So this is going to be a certain 10 lines of code. So if you open the Xcode developmental tool that is used for iPhone development, you'll find out there will be a certain code